Leah is a Baltimore-based artist who was a 2010 Sondheim finalist, a 2011 recipient of a Maryland State Art Council Individual Artist Grant, and a 2012 Sondheim semifinalist. She is shown in the Baltimore Museum of Art, the Stamp Gallery at the University of Maryland, Arlington Art Center, Montpelier Art Center, and the RTKL Architectural Firm. So without further ado, Leah.
So, like was mentioned, I was a 2009 graduate of the summer. It's a low residency program. I took 20, I was a little bit different than Andrew. I took 20 years off between undergrad and grad school. So coming into a grad program, I'd already been living in Baltimore for a long time, and I came in as a sculptor. But I left as an installation artist. So in order to kind of sustain a practice as an installation artist, not everybody's going to give you a space every day to install work. I have a couple, kind of a philosophy and a strategy that I feel is going to sustain my practice as I go forward. And that's one of them. That I have no answers is one thing, and that I actually welcome failure within my practice and with, going forward in my career. So these are actually my questions. So when I say I have no answers, what I'm trying to say is that I approach both my career as an artist and the practice of being an artist as a series of questions. And so my questions are surrounding drawing, kind of the expanded notion of drawing. They surround kind of an idea of a liminal state between what is noticed and what is overlooked. And I also am interested in audience and maybe shifting that hierarchy of audience so that perhaps the the art object isn't the central point of art, but maybe it takes the audience to complete a piece and actually to point outside of itself. So those are generally the questions I go into my practice with. And as an installation artist, I'll install a show thinking about these questions, but I'm forced to find a way to produce this in a studio and potentially produce this outside of like a traditional studio practice. So my thesis show was the really early stages. In fact, my first installation was my thesis show, where I basically I considered it a snapshot of where I was in thinking as an artist. Having taken 20 years off, grad school wasn't an end point, it wasn't a beginning of something, it was just kind of a place to start shift my practice a little bit. So that was the snapshot of some of my work that I did in my installation, trying to think about taking the simplest means to potentially shift somebody's viewpoint of the space they walk through every day. And this is where it comes to failure. One of the things I did in what I do welcome about my show is that was an utter failure. I drew my tools right into my show. And so how I view failure is not necessarily it didn't go right, it leads me to the next 10 years of a practice, the next 10 days of a practice. So I actually welcome the questions that show up at the end of a show that didn't go quite right. So that was my kitchen sink. Everything in the kitchen sink was in that show. I then lost a space to work, so to speak. So I had to take that ideas and those questions back into a studio. And I took that question of what if I only had one or two things to work with? How would I shift perception in space? I also kind of like this idea of the low residency program is heavily based in theory. So I began kind of this idea and strongly work this way now. I do a theory-based practice where reading is and asking questions and research is integral to my practice and no less important to me. So I can go weeks or months where I may not have a space to work. But the reading I'm doing is going to find its way into my practice, and then I take what I learned from actually implementing it back into the research of my practice. Then moving out of grad school, I even lose a studio. I didn't really have a studio. So one of the things how I approach work as an installation artist now is to accept offers, to do things in kind of DIY spaces. In fact, Andrew and I teamed up a little bit in this, not really, but this was somebody's, a grad students at Mica who had a space in there where they were living that they weren't using, and they suggested that I come in and respond to the space. So it's important, I think, to be kind of open to where you find opportunities to kind of approach the questions you have as an artist. Around not too long after that, I had that same opportunity at a regional show called the Sondheim show, and it gives you an opportunity to show at something like the Baltimore Museum of Art. And I have applied for this 3 or 4 times. One year I made it all the way to the finalists. Last year I made it to the semifinalists, and there are times that I, haven't made it very far at all. What's important to me sometimes about applying to shows is not necessarily do I get into the show, but I look at the jurors and who's taking a look at my work, and that's as important to me often as actually making it to the end of a show. Though this was a fantastic experience. To ride my bike to the BMA and draw on the walls was fantastic. So that's a little bit of that. One of the other things that I find important is to try to get your research, blogs and registries that might be appropriate for your work. So this is the Drawing Center's viewing program, and it's a jury-based registry, but I've had people contact me having looked onto this registry. Nothing necessarily has come from it yet, but I do have people that have put me into proposals that they are shopping out to things. So I really think it's important to not only research what you're doing in terms of your practice, but research where it is that you're showing. It's a big art world out there, and we really need to know, I think, kind of the machine we're being thread through. I'm not going to go out necessarily and get work into a commercial gallery because I pull my work off and throw it into the trash, basically, at the end of a show. So I have to be a little bit clear about where I'm applying to things. Then, when I don't have a show, I take my work elsewhere, out into the field. What I did do was apply for residencies and a grant. I didn't get a residency, but I got a grant, and I took that money and I created my own residency out in southern Utah and New Mexico to kind of research what I was interested in. This was a show at University of Maryland, like I said, researching work that a university is going to be better for me than potentially a commercial gallery. What I did here was I kind of contextualized my work with other artists that I knew that worked similarly to me, so we shopped out like a complete show, as opposed to me going in saying, I do this. They don't know where to put me. We actually presented a group show to them, and they took us up on that offer. This was a residency work I did in a residency this summer called Art 342 in Fort Collins. I researched residencies. I don't have a lot of money to spend, so residencies that are going to be relatively free and that are interdisciplinary. That's interesting to me. There were writers and composers at this residency, so it's very important to me to work with people working in different fields altogether. And so I'm still kind of questioning the idea of drawing in these. And that is the work I did this summer at the residency. So I think the cat meowed at me. So that is it.